The thumb drive burned in my grip. Proof my stepfather had been stealing everything. Mark's voice cut through the door. "You don't get to leave with that." The office was wrecked, my escape route a shattered window. One wrong move, and he'd bury the truth forever. My mother's future, my home, all of it already stolen. The lock clicked. Too late. The cursor flickered against a spreadsheet titled Project Replacement, its steady pulse mimicking the thrum of blood in Leo's ears. Mark's office smelled of expensive cedar wood and the stale metallic tang of a cooling computer. Leo gripped the mouse, his palm leaving a damp smear on the polished plastic. Row after row of cold, calculated dates carved out his future. October 12th, initiate transfer of school records. November 1st, finalize boarding school deposit. November 15th, vacate bedroom. Mark hadn't just planned a move, he had engineered an erasure. Leo's eyes scanned the grid, the blue light of the monitor reflecting in his glasses. The document was a roadmap of his own disappearance. Mark had categorized Leo's life into phases, like a decommissioned piece of hardware. There were notes in the margins. Subject exhibits escalating social detachment and relocation to specialized facility recommended for maternal peace of mind. The clinical language made Leo's stomach churn. It wasn't just about sending him away. It was about making his mother, Sarah, believe it was necessary. Mark was building a case, file by file, lie by lie. The basement air was cool, but Leo felt a bead of sweat slide down his spine, a cold needle of anxiety. Caleb's knuckles rapped against the mahogany doorframe, a sharp, rhythmic warning. The floorboards groaned under Caleb's shifting weight in the hallway. Leo fumbled with the silver thumb drive, his tremors making the metal teeth scrape against the port. "Hurry," Caleb hissed, his voice a jagged whisper that seemed to bounce off the pristine, white-painted walls. The garage door just cycled. He's home. Leo ignored the tightening in his chest. He clicked and dragged the files, watching the green progress bar crawl across the monitor with agonizing slowness. Every percentage point felt like an hour. Outside, the heavy rumble of a luxury SUV vibrated through the foundation of the house. A heavy car door slammed, the sound echoing through the quiet Naperville neighborhood like a gavel strike. Leo's breath hitched, shallow and hot. He yanked the drive from the slot the second the transfer window vanished. The plastic casing felt slick in his hand. He shoved the drive into his pocket, the sharp edge digging into his thigh as he scrambled away from the desk. He straightened the leather chair, erasing the physical ghost of his presence, while Mark's heavy footsteps crunched across the gravel driveway outside. "Is it done?" Caleb asked, his eyes wide and darting toward the front of the house. He was already halfway to the stairs, his lanky frame hunched as if trying to become invisible. "I got it," Leo breathed, though his heart was hammering so hard he could barely hear his own voice. "I got the whole timeline. He's been planning this since before the wedding." The front door lock turned with a heavy, mechanical thud. The sound of the deadbolt sliding back was final, a gate closing behind them. Leo felt the sudden urge to count. 1, 2, 3. He needed the rhythm to stay upright. He followed Caleb toward the back of the house, their sneakers squeaking faintly on the polished hardwood. They needed to get out, but the house felt like it was shrinking, the walls closing in to trap them in Mark's perfect sterile cage. Leo and Caleb didn't make it to the back door. The heavy tread of Mark's designer loafers stopped in the foyer, then pivoted. Usually, Mark went straight to the kitchen for a glass of sparkling water, but today, the rhythm was off. The footsteps headed straight for the office. "Leo." Mark's voice was smooth, a low baritone that carried a lethal edge of suspicion. "Are you in there, son?" Leo froze. He was standing in the shadows of the dining room, the thumb drive a burning weight in his pocket. He looked at Caleb, who looked like he was about to faint. Caleb's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Just a frantic, questioning gesture toward the window. Mark rounded the corner. He stood in the doorway of the office, his rimless glasses catching the afternoon sun. He didn't look angry yet. He looked curious, like a scientist observing a specimen that had moved unexpectedly. He looked at the desk, then at the slightly askew chair, and finally, his gaze snapped to Leo standing in the hallway. "What are you doing in my workspace, Leo?" Mark asked. He reached up and straightened his silk tie. 1 tug, 2, 3, the triple tug. Leo's skin went cold. "I was looking for a stapler." Leo lied, his voice cracking. "For my history project." Mark stepped into the room, his presence filling the space, pushing the air out. He didn't believe it. He walked to the computer and touched the monitor. "The screen is warm, and you're sweating. Why are you sweating, Leo?" "It's hot in here," Leo said, his mind racing. He needed to get past him. He needed to get that drive to a computer Mark didn't control. Mark's eyes dropped to Leo's pocket. The outline of the thumb drive was visible against the fabric of his jeans. Mark's face transformed, the mask of the concerned stepfather slipping to reveal the predator underneath. He didn't yell. He lunged. The movement was sudden and violent. Mark grabbed Leo's shoulder, his fingers digging into the bone like iron talons. Leo twisted, trying to pull away, but Mark was stronger, heavier. They crashed into the mahogany desk, a lamp toppling over and shattering against the floor. The sound of breaking glass was deafening in the quiet house. "Give it to me," Mark hissed, his face inches from Leo's. He smelled of expensive cologne and the metallic tang of rage. Leo shoved his elbow into Mark's chest, a desperate, clumsy strike. He felt the air leave Mark's lungs, a sharp grunt of pain. For a second, the grip loosened. Leo didn't wait. He scrambled toward the open window, the one he'd cracked earlier for ventilation. He didn't care about the height. He didn't care about the rose bushes below. He threw himself through the frame, the wooden sill catching him in the gut before he tumbled into the dirt and thorns. The scratches burned his arms, but he was up in a second, sprinting toward the curb where Caleb's beat-up sedan was idling. "Go! Go!" Leo screamed, vaulting into the passenger seat. Caleb didn't ask questions. He slammed the car into gear, the tires screeching against the asphalt as they tore away from the curb. Leo looked back and saw Mark standing on the lawn, perfectly still, straightening his tie for the 3rd time. Once they were 3 blocks away, Leo's hands began to shake at a frequency he couldn't count. He pulled the drive from his pocket. It was still there. He felt a surge of triumph, a spark of hope that he finally had the weapon he needed to save his mother. He plugged the drive into Caleb's laptop, his fingers flying across the keys. "Look at this," Leo said, his voice trembling. "It's not just the school stuff. Look at these account numbers." He opened a folder labeled Asset Realization. It was a ledger of every cent Sarah had inherited from Leo's father. There were transfers, thousands of dollars at a time, moving from Sarah's trust into a series of accounts ending in Cayman Holdings. "He's stealing it," Caleb whispered, staring at the screen. "Leo, he's taking everything she has. If you show her this, she has to believe you. This isn't just a troubled kid making up stories. This is a crime." Leo nodded, the adrenaline finally starting to ebb, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. He had the proof, he had the truth. He felt like he had finally found the right key to the door that had been locked since his father died. He just had to get back to his mother before Mark could spin his own version of the story, subverted. Leo stared at the ledger on Caleb's laptop, the columns of numbers glowing like neon signs in the dim interior of the car. This was it. This was the smoking gun he had been searching for. He felt a rare, soaring sense of competence. He wasn't just a kid who counted stairs, he was a protector. He had used his technical skills to uncover a massive fraud. Mark had siphoned over $400,000 into offshore accounts in less than a year. "This makes so much sense," Leo said, his voice growing confident, almost excited. "This is why he wants me gone. I'm the only one watching the digital footprint. If I'm at some boarding school in the middle of nowhere, he can bleed her dry and she'll never even get a notification. We have to go back, right now. If we show her the transfer logs, he's done." Caleb nodded, his grip on the steering wheel tightening. Yeah, you're right. No one can argue with bank records. It's black and white. Even your mom can't ignore this." Leo felt a wave of relief so profound it made his vision blur for a second. He could see the ending. The police arriving, Sarah realizing Leo had saved them, the two of them being a family again, without the shadow of Mark Stevens looming over them. He felt like he'd finally won a game he'd been losing for years. They pulled back into the driveway 20 minutes later. The house looked peaceful, the late afternoon sun painting the brickwork in warm oranges and reds. Leo hopped out of the car, clutching the laptop like a shield. He walked through the front door, ready for the confrontation. "Mom," he shouted, his voice echoing in the foyer. "Mom, you need to see this. I have proof of what Mark is doing." Sarah appeared at the top of the stairs, but she wasn't alone. Mark was standing behind her, his hand resting firmly, possessively, on her shoulder. Sarah's face was red, her eyes swollen from crying. "Leo," she whispered, her voice trembling. "How could you?" Leo stopped at the base of the stairs. 1, 2, 3. "No, Mom, listen. I went into his office because I knew something was wrong. Look at this." He opened the laptop and held it up, pointing at the screen. "He's stealing your money. He's moving it to offshore accounts. Here are the logs." Mark didn't flinch. He didn't even look at the screen. He just looked at Sarah with a look of profound, weary sadness. "I told you, Sarah," Mark said softly. "The obsession with the computer. The paranoia. He started fabricating things now. He's trying to destroy our marriage because he can't handle the idea of you being happy." "I'm not fabricating anything," Leo screamed. "Look at the routing numbers, Mom. Look at the dates." Sarah stepped down one stair, her hands shaking. "Mark showed me the office, Leo. He showed me the broken lamp. He showed me his lip where you hit him. And then he showed me the bank alerts." Leo frowned. "What alerts?" "The alerts that someone was trying to hack into our joint holdings from an unauthorized device," Mark said, stepping down beside Sarah. "My security firm flagged the attempt 10 minutes ago. It originated from a mobile IP, likely a laptop in a moving vehicle." The truth hit Leo like a physical blow to the stomach. Mark hadn't just been stealing. He had set up a tripwire. The moment Leo accessed those files outside the home network, it triggered a security breach notification that went straight to Sarah's phone. "Leo, Mark was trying to protect that money for Toby's college fund," Sarah sobbed, covering her mouth with her hand. "And you tried to take it? To frame him?" "No, that's not what happened." Leo lunged forward, trying to show her the screen again, but Mark was faster. Mark stepped in front of Sarah, his face hardening. That's enough, Leo. You've crossed a line into criminal behavior. You're not just troubled anymore. You're dangerous. Leo looked at the screen. The files he was looking at, the ones that had seemed so clear, suddenly looked different. Mark had renamed the folders. The one labeled Asset Realization now read Toby Education Trust. The transfers weren't to Cayman Holdings. They were to a local credit union account in Sarah's name that Leo didn't recognize. Mark had anticipated the theft. He had created a mirror version of the data, a trap designed specifically for someone with Leo's skills. Leo stood in the foyer, the laptop feeling like a lead weight. He hadn't found the truth. He had walked right into a pre-built cage. He had given Mark exactly the evidence he needed to prove Leo was a delusional, violent thief. Sarah looked at him with a mixture of fear and pity that was worse than any anger. She didn't see her protector. She saw a monster. "Give me the laptop, Leo," Mark said, extending a hand. "Before I have to call the police to report the theft of company hardware." The next morning, the house felt like a tomb. Leo had spent the night in the attic, curled up on a dusty rug, listening to the rhythmic hum of the central air. He didn't want to go down. He didn't want to see the pity in his mother's eyes or the smug, silent triumph on Mark's face. But hunger and the need for a charge for his phone eventually drove him toward the kitchen. As he reached the landing, he saw a stranger standing in the hallway. The man was massive, with a buzz cut and a neck that seemed as wide as Leo's waist. He wore a black polo shirt with a discreet S security logo on the chest. He was picking at his cuticles, his thumbs a mess of raw skin. "Who are you?" Leo asked, his voice sounding small in the high-ceilinged hallway. The man didn't answer. He just stepped into the center of the passage, blocking the way to the kitchen. He didn't move a muscle, but his presence was like a wall of cold stone. "This is Victor." Mark's voice came from the kitchen. "He's a security contractor. He's here to make sure everyone stays safe while we prepare for the move." Mark stepped into view, holding a cup of coffee. He looked perfectly rested. "Your mother is very upset, Leo. She's resting. Victor is here to ensure she isn't disturbed by any more outbursts. You're hiring a bodyguard to keep me away from my own mother?" Leo felt a surge of heat in his chest, a desperate anger. "I'm hiring a professional to maintain order," Mark corrected. "Victor, if the boy tries to enter the master's suite or the nursery, please escort him back to his room. Firmly." Victor nodded once. He looked at Leo, his eyes empty of any emotion. He was a tool, a physical extension of Mark's will. Leo tried to push past him, a futile gesture of defiance. Victor didn't even use his hands. He simply shifted his weight, his shoulder catching Leo in the chest and sending him stumbling back toward the stairs. The physical disparity was laughable. Leo was a 17-year-old kid who spent his time behind a screen. Victor was a machine designed for containment. "Go back upstairs, Leo," Mark said, taking a slow sip of his coffee. "Count your stairs. It'll help you calm down." Leo retreated. 1, 2, 3. He felt the humiliation like a burn. He was a prisoner in his own home, guarded by a man who didn't even see him as a person. He spent the afternoon staring at the attic vent, listening to the sounds of the house. He heard the muffled cry of baby Toby, followed by the low, dirge-like humming the infant did when he was stressed. It was a haunting sound, a tiny echo of the misery permeating the walls. Then his phone buzzed. A text from Caleb. "Leo, I'm so sorry. He's ruining my dad. He sent over these logs showing I was the one who initiated the hack. My dad is losing it. He says if I ever speak to you again, he's sending me to military school. I have to block you. I'm sorry. Leo stared at the screen until it went dark. His last link to the world was gone. He was alone in the dark, with a monster downstairs and a wall of meat guarding the door. But then, he remembered the basement. There was a loose brick behind the old furnace, a place where his father used to hide his emergency cash. Mark had renovated the whole house, but he'd missed that one corner of the basement because it was damp and smelled of mold. Leo had hidden something there months ago, just in case. He waited until he heard the heavy footsteps of Victor moving toward the front of the house to check the perimeter. Leo slipped out of the attic, moving with the silence of a ghost. He bypassed the main stairs, using the old laundry chute to slide down into the mudroom. He crawled through the dark toward the furnace. His fingers brushed against the rough, damp brick. He pulled. It slid out with a gritty scrape. Inside wasn't money. It was an old, battered laptop, his father's old work machine. It was slow, it was clunky, but it had one thing Mark's high-end systems didn't: a direct, hardware-level backdoor to the home's original security hub that Leo had programmed years ago. He opened the lid. The screen flickered to life, the dim glow illuminating the cobwebs in the corner. He began to type, his fingers moving with a frantic, desperate precision. He didn't need the cloud. He didn't need the internet. He just needed to get into the local drive of Mark's primary workstation. The high-pitched whine of the server racks in the pool house echoed through the vents, a constant, piercing frequency. Leo ignored it. He searched for the master key, the one file that controlled the rolling encryption Mark used for everything. There, a file titled Foundation_Alpha. He clicked it. The screen filled with data. Not just the spreadsheet, but everything. Mark's real name, Marcus Thorne. A list of 3 other women, all widows, all in different states. A folder titled Liquidated Assets for each one. Leo felt a chill that had nothing to do with the basement air. Mark wasn't just a thief. He was a predator who specialized in grief. He found women at their lowest point, moved in, and erased their lives before moving on to the next. "I have you," Leo whispered, the words catching in his throat. "I finally have you." He began to copy the files, his heart hammering in his ears. He just needed to get this to his mother. He just needed her to see the names of the other women. He heard a floorboard creak above him, then the sound of the basement door opening. "Leo?" Mark's voice was a soft, deadly purr. "I know you're down there. I can smell the dust you've kicked up." Leo scrambled to close the laptop, but it was too late. The light from the stairs spilled into the basement, and Mark was there, silhouetted against the doorway. He wasn't wearing his glasses. He looked younger, more dangerous. "You never know when to stop, do you?" Mark said, stepping down into the dark. "You're like a virus. You just keep trying to find a way in." Leo backed into the corner, clutching the laptop to his chest. "I know who you are, Marcus. I know about the others. I know about the woman in Seattle." Mark stopped. For the first time, his composure wavered. His hand went to his tie. 1, 2, 3. "Names on a screen, Leo," Mark said, his voice dropping to a whisper. "That's all they are. Do you think your mother wants to believe she's a victim? Do you think she wants to believe her husband is a ghost? She's fragile. If you tell her this, you'll break her. And I'll make sure you're the one who takes the blame for the shattered pieces." Mark lunged. He was faster than Leo expected. He grabbed Leo's throat, pinning him against the cold concrete wall. The laptop fell to the floor with a plastic crack. "You're going to a camp, Leo," Mark hissed, his fingers tightening. "A place where they specialize in boys who see things that aren't there. And by the time you get out, your mother and I will be gone. We'll have a new name, a new life, and you'll just be a bad memory." Leo struggled, his vision swimming. He reached out, his hand brushing against the hot pipe of the furnace. He didn't think. He grabbed it. The heat seared his palm, a white-hot scream of pain. But he used the leverage to shove Mark back. Mark stumbled, his heel catching on the loose brick. Leo didn't wait. He grabbed the laptop and bolted for the stairs. He burst through the kitchen door, gasping for air, his hand throbbing with a rhythmic, pulsing agony. "Mom," he screamed. "Mom, help!" Sarah was standing at the kitchen island, a pen in her hand. She was looking at a stack of papers. She looked up, her face pale and drawn. "Leo, what happened to your hand?" she asked, her voice flat, devoid of the warmth he remembered. "He tried to kill me," Leo shouted, holding up the laptop. "Look at this. His name isn't Mark Stevens. He's done this before. He's a professional." Mark stepped into the kitchen, his breathing heavy, his shirt rumpled. He looked like a man who had just survived an attack. "Sarah, he's having a breakdown," Mark said, his voice trembling with a perfect faked fear. "He attacked me in the basement. He's hallucinating. He thinks I'm someone else. Subverted." Leo stood in the center of the kitchen, the old laptop clutched in his burned hand. The pain was a sharp, grounding force. He felt a surge of desperate, righteous certainty. He had the proof. The screen was still active, showing a police report from 5 years ago with Mark's face and the name Marcus Thorne underneath it. "Mom, look," Leo said, his voice dropping to a pleading whisper. "I'm not crazy. I'm not lying. Just look at the screen. 1 second, that's all I'm asking. Look at the face on the report and look at him." Sarah looked at Leo, then at Mark. She looked exhausted, a woman who had been hollowed out by months of quiet warfare. She took a step toward Leo, her hand reaching out for the laptop. Leo felt a glimmer of victory. This was the moment. The truth was too loud to ignore. He held the screen steady, the blue light reflecting in her wide, tear-filled eyes. He saw her gaze settle on the photo. He saw the recognition flicker in her expression. "It's him, isn't it?" Leo asked, his heart soaring. "You see it now." Sarah's hand touched the edge of the laptop. She looked at Mark, who stood perfectly still, his face a mask of tragic disappointment. "I see it, Leo," Sarah whispered. She turned back to the kitchen island. She picked up the pen. "I'm so sorry," she said, her voice breaking. She didn't look at the laptop again. She looked at the papers on the counter. With a quick, jagged motion, she scribbled her signature at the bottom of the final page. "Mom?" Leo's voice was a small, broken thing. "What are you doing?" "I'm saving our family," Sarah sobbed, pushing the papers toward Mark. "I can't do this anymore, Leo. The fighting, the spying, the delusions. Mark told me you might try to do this. He told me you'd find some way to make him the villain. It's not a delusion. It's a police report." Leo shoved the laptop toward her, but she pushed it away, her face contorted in agony. "Mark explained it, Leo," she screamed. "He told me about the deep fakes. He told me you've been using those programs to create fake evidence. He showed me the software on your computer." Leo froze. Mark had planted it. The project replacement wasn't just about the move. It was about discrediting every piece of evidence Leo could ever find. Mark had shown her how easily a face could be swapped, how a document could be forged. He had immunized her against the truth. "The transport is here, Sarah," Mark said softly, stepping forward and taking the papers. He looked at the signature, Sarah Miller Stevens, and a small, terrible smile touched the corners of his mouth. You did the right thing. For Toby. For us. Leo looked out the window. A white van was pulling into the driveway. 2 men in gray uniforms were stepping out. They weren't police. They were intervention specialists from a wilderness camp in the high desert. No, Leo whispered. Mom, please, don't do this. It's for your own good, honey, Sarah said, her voice sounding like it was coming from a great distance. They're going to help you. They're going to fix whatever is broken. Mark stepped toward Leo, his hand reaching for the laptop. I'll take that now, son. We wouldn't want you to lose your evidence on the way to the facility. Leo backed away, but Victor was already behind him. The massive man's hands clamped onto Leo's shoulders like iron manacles. Let go of me. Leo struggled, but it was like trying to fight a mountain. Mark took the laptop from Leo's unresisting fingers. He didn't even look at the screen. He simply dropped it onto the tile floor and brought his heavy heel down on it. The sound of crunching plastic and shattering glass echoed through the kitchen. The data is corrupted, Mark said, his voice flat and final. Just like the source. The 2 men from the van entered the kitchen. They didn't look like monsters. They looked like gym teachers. They smiled at Sarah with practiced professional empathy. We'll take it from here, Mrs. Stevens, one of them said. He'll be in good hands. The first few weeks are the hardest, but he'll thank you later. They grabbed Leo's arms. He didn't fight this time. He couldn't. He looked at his mother, but she had turned away, her face buried in Mark's chest. Mark held her, his fingers stroking her hair, his eyes watching Leo with a cold, predatory triumph. As they dragged him toward the door, Leo saw the papers on the counter. It wasn't just a commitment form. It was a full power of attorney. Sarah hadn't just sent him away. She had handed Mark the keys to everything she owned. The van doors opened. A dark, windowless maw. Leo was shoved inside, the metal floor cold against his knees. The last thing he saw before the doors slammed shut was his mother standing on the porch, clutching baby Toby, her figure growing smaller and smaller as the van pulled away. He was gone, and Mark had won. The van bounced over the curb, the suspension groaning under the weight of the silence inside. Leo sat on the floor, his back against the vibrating metal wall. He didn't cry. He didn't scream. He just counted. 1, 2, 3, 4. The men in the front were talking about a football game, their voices a dull murmur through the partition. They didn't care about the boy in the back. To them, he was just a paycheck, a troubled youth being transported to a healing environment. Leo looked at his hands. They were shaking, but not from fear. They were shaking with a cold, focused energy. He reached into the small, hidden pocket in the waistband of his hoodie, the one Mark hadn't found. His phone was still there. He had switched it to silent the moment he saw the van. He had 1 bar of signal. Wouldn't be enough for a call, but it was enough for a stream. He knew the house's security system better than anyone. He knew the nursery cam was linked to Sarah's tablet. And he knew that Mark, in his arrogance, had never changed the admin password for the local hub. He began to type. Mom, he whispered into the darkness of the van. If you're listening, if you're watching, I'm not going to fight you. I just want to say goodbye to Toby. He didn't talk about the money. He didn't talk about Marcus Thorne. He just talked to the baby. He talked about the way Toby used to hum when he was happy. He talked about the blue blanket hidden in the false bottom of the trunk in the nursery. The one Mark didn't know about, because it was a gift from Leo's father. Check the trunk, Toby, Leo said, his voice cracking. Check under the blue blanket. That's where the real papers are, the ones Dad left for us. It was a lie. There were no papers in the trunk. But Leo knew that Sarah would look. She would look because she was desperate for a connection to the man she had actually loved. And when she looked, she would find what Mark had actually hidden there. The stolen bonds, the physical evidence of the theft that he couldn't risk leaving in a digital format. The van slowed down. They were at a red light. Leo saw his chance. The back door of these vans had an emergency release, a small red handle designed for accidents. It was supposed to be locked from the front, but Leo had noticed the security light on the dashboard was flickering. The wiring in this van was old, the maintenance neglected. He lunged for the handle. The alarm shrieked, a high-pitched wail that vibrated through the floor. The doors swung open, the cool evening air rushing in. Leo tumbled out onto the asphalt, the impact jarring his teeth. He didn't stop to look back. He ran. He ran toward the pool house, the one place on the property that Mark hadn't fully secured because he thought it was just a storage shed for chemicals and filters. He burst through the door, the smell of chlorine and ozone hitting him like a physical blow. He scrambled to the server rack in the corner, the heart of the house's digital nervous system. He plugged his phone into the bypass port. "Come on," he hissed, his fingers flying across the screen. "Come on, Sarah. Look at the tablet." On the screen of his phone, he saw the nursery. Sarah was there. She was standing over the trunk. She had the blue blanket in her hands. She was crying. Then she reached deeper. Her fingers brushed against a manila envelope taped to the underside of the false bottom. She pulled it out. Mark entered the room. He didn't see the camera. He just saw Sarah with the envelope. "What are you doing, Sarah?" His voice was no longer smooth. It was jagged, sharp. "Leo told me to look," Sarah said, her voice sounding stronger than it had in months. "He told me to look for a gift from his father. But this isn't a gift, Mark. These are bearer bonds, my bonds, the ones that were supposed to be in the safe at the bank." Mark stepped toward her, his face contorting into something unrecognizable. "Give those to me, Sarah. You don't know what you're looking at." "I know exactly what I'm looking at," Sarah said. She held up her phone. The live stream was still running. "And so do the police. Leo called them from the van, Mark. They're on their way." It was the final bluff. Leo hadn't called the police yet. He hadn't had time. But the moment Sarah said the words, Mark broke. He lunged for her, his hands reaching for her throat. But the door burst open. It wasn't the police. It was Caleb. And behind him, his father, Mr. Johnson. Caleb didn't look like a coward anymore. He looked like a kid who had finally realized that some things were more important than a partnership. He had a heavy iron wrench in his hand, the one from the garage. "Get away from her!" Caleb shouted. Mark froze. He looked at the wrench, then at the manila envelope, then at the camera lens in the corner of the room. He realized the game was over. The perfect facade had finally cracked, and the rot underneath was visible to the whole world. The sirens began to wail in the distance, a low, rising hum that grew into a deafening roar. Leo sat on the floor of the pool house, watching the screen. He saw the police enter the nursery. He saw the handcuffs snap shut around Mark's wrists. He saw his mother collapse into Caleb's father's arms, her body racking with sobs of relief. He felt a sudden, overwhelming exhaustion. He leaned his head against the server rack, the rhythmic hum of the cooling fans, a soothing, mechanical lullaby. 1, 2, 3. He didn't need to count anymore. The chaos had stopped. The noise had faded. A few days later, the house was quiet. The project replacement spreadsheet had been deleted, replaced by a folder of legal documents titled Restitution. Sarah stood in the driveway, her posture straight, her eyes clear for the first time in years. She looked at Leo, who was standing by a small, packed suitcase. "You don't have to go, Leo," she said, her voice soft. "We can make this work. We can be a family again." Leo looked at the horizon, where the Arizona desert stretched into a shimmering, golden nothingness. He thought about the stairs, the hidden cameras, the smell of bleach and secrets. He thought about the boy who had spent his life hiding in the shadows of other people's crimes. "I need to find my own rhythm, Mom," Leo said. "I need to go somewhere where the numbers don't have to be a shield." He hugged her, a real, physical connection that didn't feel like a goodbye, but a release. He kissed baby Toby on the forehead, the infant looking up at him with wide, curious eyes. Toby wasn't humming anymore. He was laughing. Leo climbed into the car, a used SUV he'd bought with a small portion of the inheritance Sarah had insisted on giving him. He started the engine, the rumble a steady, reliable heartbeat. He drove away from the pristine suburb, away from the house that had been a cage, and toward the open road. As he crossed the state line, he looked in the rearview mirror. The house was gone. The shadows were gone. He reached for the radio and turned it up. He didn't count the miles. He didn't count the minutes. He just drove. For the first time in his life, Leo Miller wasn't looking for an exit. He was looking for the horizon. The end. Do not proceed past this point.